And the reason for that is that we have a very successful YouTube channel, and we like to place all of our events on YouTube subsequently then for people who couldn't make tonight's session but who want to watch it in the coming days and weeks. So if I will try and record it in such a way that people's faces aren't seen, but if you really object to your face being seen at all, if you want to make extra certain, you can just turn off your video, and that would solve the problem for us. But I will record it in such a way as the people's faces aren't seen anyway. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to ask Stefan if you could just, first of all, if you could unmute yourself. So in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, if you could just click on the little microphone, that should unmute you. Yeah, I can see that you're unmuted now. And if you would just share your screen then, because Stefan has a PowerPoint presentation which he wants to run us through then, and hopefully that PowerPoint should come up on the screen and fill our screen for us.
I'll just do a couple of things before that, if you don't mind, Jason. And thank you all for coming to this meeting. And I've been looking at surnames in Ireland for quite a long time. But just in case you're doing some research on your own surnames at some stage, there are a few warning points, really. If you're interested in Irish names, basically, there's a couple of things that are useful. There's this book here, which is Irish Names by Maguire and O'Curran. And this one here, which is Slinchin Ahera and All Irish Surnames by Sean de Wolof. These are the Bibles, really, of Irish names. If you're interested in English names, something like Cottle and Reaney. If you're interested in Scottish names, Black. Be wary with Black or Cottle or Reaney when they're trying to talk about Irish names. It's normally rubbish because they don't understand Irish to start with. Okay, so I'll now go into my talk. You mentioned that I'm writing a book about bigger at the moment, and when my wife was alive, she used to say, "You're thoroughly biggered, Stefan." So I hope I'm not that bigger tonight. Okay, I'll share a screen with you now.
Can I just say something before you begin there, Stefan? I should have said that at the end, that this will last for about 45 minutes, folks. At the end, I will try and field any questions or comments that you might have. If you do have anything, please try and direct it through the chat function at the bottom of your screen, and I will pick those up as the session goes on and then field those to Stefan at the end. So that's how we'll operate it.
Okay, I'll start off really with surnames, which actually go back in Ireland to a very long time indeed. A name like O'Cleary, which has come to us as Clark, for example, now goes right back to around the 7th century, for example. Surnames in Irish, therefore, have a very long tradition, which is unusual, in fact, in Europe. The little comment directly under Surnames of Ireland is Trisha Ducas nan Ilunch, means the tradition is stronger than learning. And in some ways that is the case in Ireland, and surnames are part of that tradition. My name, by the way, is pronounced Ó Direáin up in the north, and my family, which originally came from Connacht, would have been Ó Direáin. And the name itself comes from two words, which is Drí and Ain, meaning druid bird, which is the wren, the little wren bird, which of course was the bird of the Druids. So I'm a Druid to some degree. Right, this covers what I'm going to talk about tonight, which is the origin of surnames, what's in a name, about Irish names, about problems connected with Irish names, about formation of Irish names. And then I'll deal with some Norse names, Norman names, some English names, Welsh names, Scottish names, Manx, Palatinate, and Huegenot names in Ireland. And I'll talk about how strange these names can be mutated. And if you look at, for example, a collection of Irish names and look at the Irish section and then look at the corrupted Anglicized section, you'll find that it's 3 times the amount of the original Irish names, which show the corruptions in the names. Right, what's in a name to start with? And even that is interesting. The name in culture. For example, in the ancient Egyptians believed it was a disaster if your name was written or taken in vain. It was a curse, effectively. You're probably aware of Judaism, that the name Yahweh, we don't know how it's really pronounced, but because the vowels are not there. But of course, that's a name for God, and there was a prohibition on the name. Similarly, if you go to the Sami people that live in Lapland in northern Sweden, Norway, Finland, and parts of Russia, you'll find that the name means actually your soul. And in the Irish tradition, there is part of that as well. There was for a long, long time sacred names like you see today, Padraig, Bríd, Mura, were never used because they were regarded as too sacred. And if you go back to old Irish tradition, you find in the Ruaireacht, as it's called, which is the national tales of Ireland, involving Cuchulainn, etc., which date back to about 620. You'll find that Cuchulainn's son was called Conla. Now, Cuchulainn disappeared before Conla appeared in this world, but Conla had a prohibition, a taboo on him, that is, if anybody asked his name, he couldn't say it. He had to give his name freely. And when later on Conla came to Ireland, Cuchulainn met Conla at a ford, and the two fought, and Conla died. When he died, his body was brought in front of Cuchulainn, and Cuchulainn recognized the ring on his finger, which was his own ring, and recognized that Conla was his son. He had killed his own son. And that's the kind of ancient tradition that's connected with names. There's more to that, however. Examples in folklore, knowledge of the true name was used to gain power over a person if you had their true name. Nicknames are used instead, for example, or in fact, gods. It was dangerous to call fairies by their real name. In the Rumpelstiltskin tales and variants of that in Europe, you find that the girl can free herself from the power of a demon because she demands the name and she learns the name. In the legend of St. Olaf and the Norse tales, you find that a troll builds a church for a saint at some amazing speed, an amazing price, but the saint couldn't free himself initially. But when he learned the troll's name, walking in the woods, he was able to get free of this taboo. Again, for unbaptized children, they were in danger of kidnapped by fairies who left changelings in their place, and there was an issue about naming. Changelings were normally, unfortunately, children who would suffer from TB at a very early age, and they withered greatly away. Scandinavian lore, you had the magical beasts such as the Nix, which could only be defeated by calling their name. And in Christianity, much of Renaissance demonology, dating back to around 1300s, but really getting under steam about 1500s, it was based on getting the power over a demon by finding out his true name during an exorcism. Actually, looking at the name itself, it's got Indo-European roots. In Irish, the name is Aniam. In Om, which is the linear script, which is carved on the stones, the strokes and the dots, which dates back to probably around 200 AD or so, because it was a fully developed alphabet when it's recorded. The name Anam is very similar. In fact, they come from the same root, and Anam means soul or life. And in Old Irish, it's Aniam, which is nasalized. And it's the same word as breath, anal, which is breath, which in fact is related to the god of the sky. And you, of course, got light and so forth, like the god Lu, the god of the sun, basically. In Old German, High German, you have Namo, and Latin nomen, and Greek onoma, all from the same Indo-European root, and dating back to some sort of godlike creature. Just really as a window in the past, because surnames go with men's names in most of Europe, you find that on the Y chromosome, you can look at things going back. In particular, the haplotype, as it's called, the sort of section of genes that are related to the various types of people. And people, there's no such thing as race. These are just variations, small variations in genes. We have the R1b, which you can see on the left-hand corner, which is very strong in that western part of Europe. And you can see here that it's 80% in Ireland. Up in Iceland is 40%, which is very interesting because from the genetic studies, it looks like about half the women were from Ireland, probably taken as slaves and married on to people from Scandinavia who settled in Iceland. And we know certainly from their stories that that was partially the case at least. And you can see here how strong this feature is in Western Europe. But in Ireland, it's very pronounced indeed. Clan names. How are Irish names formed? You have the great names, really, which are clan names, and they actually are master names for a whole collection of names. The O'Neill, which is how you pronounce O'Neill properly. And by the way, Niall is pronounced Neil, really, not Niall. That's the root of that name, O'Neill. Comes from Ní Iolach, which is 9 hostages, which is Neil. Ní Iolach, the first of that generation, or Neil Glundu. And the O'Brien, which comes from Brian, and its root is Bree. Bree means exalted or high. It gives rise to the word Bray, for example, and it gives rise to Brega, which is the area around the border between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. You also have the patronymics, Mac, meaning son. Mac and Mick are the same, by the way. Mick, in fact, means sons, but used as MC, it's an abbreviation of Mac. And you have O Fada here, which is originally UA, which gives rise to UI Fada, which is used for example, a woman's name. It means of the something. That means descendant of. You've got a few occupational names which arise, like McGowan. There are very few in Ireland, which is counter to what you find in the rest of Europe. McGowan means son of the smith. McIntyre means son of the craftsperson. You've got a number of names which are connected with the church, which show that in the early Irish church, the heads of the church married. Macinaspic means son of the bishop. You have Macintaggart as well, which is son of the priest, Macinabba, son of the abbot, and so forth as well. You have Macmurrachi, which is a kind of occupational name as well, meaning a sea battler, somebody who probably may well have been a pirate or a sailor. It comes from the word mur originally, which means sea. You have nicknames of people. I'm going to come back to some of those. You have ethnic origin, which is, for example, Branach means a Welsh person. And you have its varieties here, Welsh, Walsh, and different spellings of Welsh, and Branach. And you have Fleming, which tells you where that particular person's ancestors came from, Flanders. You have also lots of bad translations, which we'll come to, and you have very few adjectival names. Kavanagh is one of them, Huegenot, which means a noble or gentle person. Running on, we have lots of problems in our names in Ireland due to colonialism largely. Colonial trade also is always to disparage the native culture and tradition, and you find that in any colonizing power, whether it be Spain, England, France, or whatever. You have a deliberate corruption of the name by people who just don't care and people who might find it funny. The colonial traditions always the administrators of the colony were from the host country like England or France, and so they never understood the native language. You had renaming to signify control. For example, the Smiths in Cavan are mostly all McGowans, which means the same thing in Irish, but the landlord changed their name for them. You have the Statutes of Kilkenny, which prohibit names, 1366. So you have the Apparel and Surnames Act, 1466. And then you have the Tudor Conquest. Penal laws introduced after the Williamite Wars. And you also have the Anglicizing issue of Maynooth when it was deliberately started by the English in 1795. And it was as a Catholic seminary, and in fact was a very heavy Anglicizing force in Ireland. You also have the natural problem of language. In English, you have something like 43 or 44 sound groups. In Irish, you have at least 20 more. Now, most people here I can see from your names are from Ireland, and you'll have some of those, but you probably won't have them all. We also had what Patrick Pearse called the murder machine, the national school system, which was introduced in 1832, where people were deliberately, their names were deliberately distorted. The Caisleán Ór book, written by Seamus O'Grana, Moira was his pen name, calls himself James O'Gallagher. And when the teacher calls out James O'Gallagher, he doesn't go to the front because he doesn't recognize his name as Seamus O'Gallagher. And he gets caned for it. And of course, there was the tally stick, the batascura, which was used to discourage people from speaking Irish as well. You also had problems where the names of people were prohibited. For example, in 1900, Teig O'Glasson in Cork was fined for having his name on his cart in Irish. And similarly, Neil MacGillivray up in Donegal was fined, Críoslach, for the same thing. They're two of many people who are fined. Neil MacGillivray was defended by Patrick Pearse, one of the few cases he took, and lost. And even today, there's trouble. For example, in the USA, putting a fada or putting an O apostrophe with your name. For example, I have to use O and then a space with my name when I'm buying things from Tesco online. They won't accept the apostrophe. Okay, so formation of names. We have compound nouns: Angus, Farragus, Cahill, Neelis, Muil Vrija, Gilla Christ, Gilla J, Olchanchower. For Angus means the N, which means one person or one thing. Gus means nimble or virile. It probably means a virile one. And Farragus comes from far, which means man, and Gus again, meaning nimble or virile or able, energetic, probably a virile man. You have Cahill, which is means the battler, somebody who likes fighting, basically, and it's translated as Charles, though the name has nothing to do with Charles at all. You have Neelis, which comes from Neil. We've had the O'Neills there, and Gus, meaning the person of Neil. We have Muil Vrija, which is used commonly. Muil is used a devotee of somebody, and so that's the influence of Christianity. You have Muil Vrija, the devotee of St. Bridget. St. Bridget's a complicated person. She was also a pagan goddess as well as a pagan triad goddess as well as a Christian saint. You have Gilla Christ, which means the devotee or servant of Christ, which is Gilchrist. You have MacGillivray or Gilday, which is, or Gilday or Macilday, which is the servant of God. And then you have other names like O'Conchover, which is O'Croher today, which is a descendant of Con, which means wolf or dog, and Chover, which means lover, so a dog or a wolf lover. You have some names that use adjectives as well, like Argal, Ardgal. McArdle is the name today, which means high brave. You have Finbar or Finbar, which means a person who has got a fair head of hair. You've got Gilladoo, which means the black-haired servant or devotee. You also have animal names like Brack, which means speckled or trout. You have Column, which means a dove. You have Sheriff, which means a foal horse. You have Shonnock, which means a fox. And then you've got jobs, for example, Brehu, meaning judge. Goa, which is smith, and Aspig, which is a bishop. You have lots of Irish names like diminutives. That is the little something, or the son of something, or the daughter of something. And Art, which actually means bear, and you get names Macharch and O'Harch, Hart, and Macart, and Art, and Cart, and McCartan, which is the same name as well, but with the diminutive. That means little bear, really. And you've got another diminutive, McArtigan. The same thing with the name Bran. Bran means a raven. You get O'Brannan, a little raven, O'Branigan. Flan, which means scarlet, becomes O'Flynn, MacGlynn, O'Flannan, O'Flanagan. Let's consider some other types of names now. Norse names are usually hybrid names in Ireland, and a lot of them are patronymics. For example, Shittrick who was a Norse king of Dublin at one stage, but his son became MacKittrick. You have Olaf became Owley, Mac Owley, Macaulay. You've got Manus, which originally comes from Latin, but comes through Norse. And the son of Manus became MacManish. Now, in fact, they're Maguires. One of the Maguires called his son Manus, and his son became MacManish. So the MacManishes might look Norse, but they're all Maguires from Fermanagh. You have the word Tumrer, which becomes toner, which is Norse. You have jobs with Norse names, so like, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, but it'd be like Logman or Logman, which became Mac Logman, which is lawyer in Norse, which became Lamont and MacClement. Let's look at Norman names. Normans, of course, were Franks and Norse mixed up together. So you get things like the German names, William, Robert, Richard, Roger, Hugh, Oliver. You get a lot of Christian names coming in from the Bible: John, Adam, Thomas, Nicholas, Peter, Jordan, Stephen, James, Philip. In Ireland, they're usually Gaelicized. For example, you would have Mac Philip, MacKillop. You would have Mac Stephen, Stevenson, etc. You have Mac Feather, which becomes Mac Gillifeather, which becomes Kilfeather, and so forth. You have MacAdav or MacAdu, which is from Adam. And John becomes Owen out of the Bible, becomes McEwen. You have lots of diminutives, for example, L endings, ending in L, et, which is actually French, Old French, ot, on, upkin, etc. And you get names like Robert becomes, little Robert is Hodgkin, and little Simon is Simcock. You have location names. A lot of the Norman names are locations which originally le, off the place. Le Courcy became de Courcy, de Lacy, de Roche, de Cusick. Cusick is also confused with the Irish name Macisic, which means the son of somebody called Isaac. Then you have patronymics like Fitzgerald, Fitzsimon, etc. Fitz means son. And then you have nicknames, which is Huegenot became, which is victory, bold and victory, from Old English originally, which became Senate. Then English names started to come in after the conquest of Ireland in the late 1100s, but mostly they came in after around the 13th century. But in Ulster, that didn't happen really until the plantation times. And of course, there were three plantations really. There was a plantation, the early plantation, which came in with Chichester in the Ulster. A lot of them left again. And then there was a big plantation after Cromwell and another one after the end of the Williamite Wars. In fact, most of them people who came in the plantation came after the Williamite Wars. You have names that are Ing names. Ing means a tribal name originally, like Ealing, for example, in South Hampshire. And kin, which is your kinfolk. Hodgkin, for example, is a name like that. Place names, loads and loads of English names are place names, and loads of Germanic names are place names. London, Hatfield, Carlisle, etc. You have relationship names, which are normally patronymic, but sometimes matronymic, like Alfred, because Alfred the Great, people were called Alfred as surnames and went down through the age. Edgar was another one like that. And you have a lot of job names in English: Smith, Taylor. They're obvious what they mean. Fuller is a fuller of cloth. Chapman is a peddler, and a barker is somebody who proclaims something, the news in a city or in a village, or in fact proclaiming something in a battle, sending orders out, etc. You have loads of nicknames, animals and personal characteristics, and somebody's disposition. For example, Armstrong, which is obvious, or Goodchild, which is obvious, or Wise, which is obvious, or a name that's not obvious, like Puttock, which actually means greedy. Welsh names come in after Henry VIII. Welsh names are really very recent. It's kind of odd. I'm not sure what the Welsh used before, but anyway, the name of the father was used. Many are not Welsh. For example, Williams, Evans, Thomas, Roberts, German names really, and they're often prefixed by a Welsh prefix, which is mab or mab, which is shortened to Ab or Ab, and that gives Ab Bevan, which is Bevan, Ab Richard, Pritchard, Ab Hugh, Pew, Ab Rees, Priest, Ab John, Ab Howell, Powell, Ab Bowen, Bowen, Morgan, the Morgan, Morgan. Now, Morgan and the Irish name Morgan is completely different to the Welsh name, by the way. I'll come to that later. Strongly influenced by the Bible, for example, Jones is literally John's son. Davy's the same. And occupation names exist, personal characteristics, and a lot of them are the place names from the landowner's estate. Double surnames are used, and quite often Anglo-Norman names like Hludwig, which is loud in battle from Old German, became Lewis. When I worked at Troisfinnet Nuclear Power Station in North Wales, 440 odd people worked there. Out of that 440 people, 220 plus were Jones. And most of the other 200 were Williams and Roberts, which gives you an idea of talking to Welsh people, whether it's Jones the tailor or Jones the thief. Scottish names, the earliest are Anglo-Norman, dating back to very earliest 1150 or so. A lot are Gaelic and Norse mixed together, like Macaulay, Macaulay, and MacLoge, MacLeod. There's also English, Flemish, Norman. Breach went to Brix, or Breach went to Bruce. Welsh was from Welsh names like Ab Mulligan, which actually comes Milligan and gets confused with Irish Milligan. But that name, remember, Scotland was partly Welsh speaking. A lot of it was Gaelic speaking, and part of it was Anglo speaking, or Anglo-Saxon speaking. You had the patronymic Gaelic Mac, meaning son. So Mac Gonal went to Donaldson. Mac Adolf went to Adamson, etc. You have names like Adams, which are probably from English. You've also fishing communities up in Aberdeenshire and in the east of Scotland, which added toe to their name, like Monto, for example, up in Banff. You have a lot of nicknames. Cameron, which comes from Cam Crone, which means bent nose. You have Campbell, and these are not the Irish Campbells. I'll tell you a bit about that later. But the Scottish Campbells come from Campbell, which means twisted mouth, bent mouth. And you have things like from Anglo-Saxon, Meikle from Old Scots, Little, White, etc. You have occupation names like Shepherd, Mason, Fletcher. And you have names after important people, like Macpherson becomes Macpherson, son of the parson. Macawashter becomes son of the master. And you have ethnic names like Scot, Fleming, and Welsh. Scot being Irish person, actually. Fleming, a Flanders person. Welsh being obviously a Welsh person. Manx names are mainly Gaelic. You have Norse names then mixed in with it, and English names, especially places in Lancashire. Also Welsh names are there too, and a lot of them are corrupted. McGillicreast becomes Milcreast or Milcreast. Kelly is really O'Kelly from Kellock, meaning fair-headed, or possibly somebody who was a monk. You have MacOwen, which is son of a person named after John the Baptist in the Bible, which becomes Cewan. You have MacHenry, which is Henry, Kinry, MacFoll or MacAl, which has become son of Paul, which becomes Quail, Christian, Cowan, which comes from MacOwen, which is On is not the same as Owen. On, like Tyrone, County Tyrone, comes from the word EO, which means yew tree, and this back end, which means born of. It's a pagan name. And you have O'Cahan, which is the battlers going to Cain. And you have Cork, which means bright crimson, or heart, going to Quirk. And Walter, which is Norman, going to Waterson. You have people who arrived from after the Franco-German wars, especially out in the 19th century, who settled in Limerick and Waterford. And they have names like Switzer, after Switzerland, Alton, Baker, from Becker, Glazier, Jacob, Lawrence, Mee, Miller, Piper, Smith again, Cripps, Poole, St. John, and Shoemaker from Schumacher. You have Huguenots, which after the revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685, They fled from France from the massacre. A lot of them joined Schomberg's army and were involved in the Williamite Wars. And after that, they were awarded land in Ireland. They were Calvinists from France, and most of them were weavers, and they settled around Lisburn, Dublin. There's a graveyard in Merrion Square, Huegenot. And examples of their names are Fontaine, Jordan, Lefanu, Latouche, Crommelin, Fleury, Maturin, and Perrier. A lot of them changed. Jacques became Jack, Lefebvre became Smith, Defoe became Defoe, Carre became Quarry, and Renou became Renew. Let's look at how strange can Irish names got. I've told you about how Irish names are created, but let's look at what happened to them. And this first one is very good because I can't explain how it ended up as Cogwell, because the name is based on two words, fur, which means cold, and ishke, which means water. O furishke, which has become Cogwell. You have the name Muel Creva, Muel meaning the devotee of a saint who named himself after a branch, becoming Mulgrew and Rice. Now, Rices in Ulster come from this name, Muel Creva. Rices in Munster come from Rhys, which is a Welsh name. They're two different Rices. Then you have Macabrehun, which is son of the judge, which has become Abraham. It's become Macbroom, it's become Judge and Brown. You have Macaloon, son of somebody called Lamb, probably, which has become Macaloon, Macloon, Gillen, Monday, and because Monday is J. Lewin in Irish, and Lamb, which is related to Lewin. You have Macachaclin, which has become Houston. There's Saint Shacklin in around the Louth area. Macanaspic, son of the bishop, has become Macanesby and Bishop. Macalwell, which is a famous Tyrone name, they're really O'Neills, as my name is as well, and as Doherty is too, and the Brawley, the Bradley, and a lot of others, coming from the word bald again, or short-haired, and battle. And it's become McCall, Campbell, McCowell, and Caulfield. You have the Macochies and O'Hockeys. Hockey comes from the word ach, which means a steed, a horse, or perhaps a war horse. So this is son of the horseman, which gives rise to Macochi, and believe it or not, Hackett. I'm related to Charlie Hockey, for example, for my sins. So the O'Hockeys were kings from Downpatrick, and the famous Down at Downpatrick was run from the O'Hockeys. And one of the O'Hockeys changed, called his son Dunleva, which means brown mountain, or Lord of the Mountain. And that's where the Mac Guntlevas and the Guntlevas come from, the Dunleavys. You have the Mac Gonachai, which is a champion, a warrior, a champion, which gives rise to McConaughey, McConkey, and Donaghy. You have Mac Given, which is black-haired Finn, probably. Finn being also an old name, Finn McCool and so forth, giving rise to Divin, Divine, Given, McAvin, McKevin, McGiffin. You have Mac Clive, which has an F-H quite often in front of that, which means Lord, Mac of the Lord, the son of the Lord, which is also MacLavine, which is son of the noble or gentle or manly Lord, Fly, which gives rise to Flaherty, for example, too, which gives rise to Claffey and Maclay, and Maclave and Glavy and Lavin and Hand, because it looks like the Irish word for hand. You have MacSharry, which comes from Sharach. Sharach means a foal, a young horse, which gives rise to MacSharry, Sherry, Foley. But a lot of people call Foley, Foley, is from Foley, which means a pirate. You have the O'Gallagly, the foreign, Norse in other words, warriors, volunteers. It gives rise to Gallagly, English, Englishby, and Inglesby. And you have O'Gneve, son of the agent, a descendant of the agent, sorry, which has come to mean Agnew and New. You have McKittrick, which has become McGettrick, Shetrick, Setright. You have McHag, son of the poet, which is McCaig, Haig, Taig, Teague, Tig, and Montague sometimes. You have McEgin, which has become McGuigan, McGuckin. McGuckin can be from MacEgan as well. McGuigan, Wigan, Fidgeon, Pigeon, Godwin, Goodfellow, Goodwin. You have MacUstin becoming McCutcheon, Hutchinson, Hutchin, McQuestion or McQuestion, McWeston, Houston, and Kitchen. And you have MacGintleva, the mountain lord of the mountains, really a Donegal or Down people, giving rise to Dunleavy, Dunla, Dunlop, and Livingstone. You have the O'Hennies becoming Henny and Bird, because N is the Irish word for bird. You have the Fudas, which become Foodie, Foodie, Swift, and Speed. And Fooder, of course, is to be agitated and move around a lot in Irish. Then you have the Magilla Isa, which is really the devotee of Christ, has become Macalis, Lys, Gillis, and Gillies. You have son of the servant or devotee of St. Finnan or Findan or Finton, Magilla Inden, Macalinden, and even Shoulder came out of that. Magilla Cullia, which became Macalhill, Macinhill, Woods, and Woodman. You also Magilla Jacker, son of that's the servant of somebody who's named himself a Saint Cull of a Wood. Magilla Jacker, the difficult Jacker, servant or devotee, which became Dockery, Hardy, and Harden. McAvergeen, which became Bergen and Bergen. The O'Kines, Kine means the barnacle goose, which has become Coin, Cohen, Kine, Colin, and Barnacle. Nora Barnacle was married to James Joyce. Her name was really O'Kine. You have this word here, O'Conine, which means the little wolf, descendant of the little wolf, but it looks like the Irish word for rabbit, and it's become rabbit today, Pat Rabbit in the Dáil down in Dublin. The O'Cravshies, Crav means bone, and this means a bone setter or a midwife, Cravshak, which became Knivesey, Cramsey, and Bonner. And you have the O'Devnia, the ending NE means the tribe of, so the tribe of the black-haired people, which became peoples, and Dini, because it looks like Dinna or Dini, which means the word for people in Irish. Then you have, let's look at some of your names just to finish in the next few minutes for questions. You have Johnston, which became John, which is from John. There's also landlords in place in Dumfriesshire. In the Irish form, which has nothing to do with John, but the name John originally, from Shan O'Neill, became Mac Shan. And there are a few of them. These two names get confused all the time. It's difficult to know who's who, really, what ancestry they have. And the name of Worthman has come up. I'm afraid it's German, but I don't know what it is. It comes from the word Wert to start with. But I don't know how that means in this name. We have Wheeler, which is a trade name, somebody who deals with wheels. And that name appears in the Irish Midlands. You have the name Barrett here, which comes from a word meaning troubler or a haggler, somebody who likes to haggle in the market, which has become Barrett. It's quite a common name and it's Anglo-Norman. You have Rogers, which can be English or Irish. It's a very common Irish name. For example, Derry, Tyrone, up to about half the population of Tory are called Mac Rory, which is translated into Rogers. The son of the Red King is what it means, Red King. And it also, the English version or the German version comes from Shrod Geri, which means somebody who's renowned using a spear, or the Anglo-French or Norman French, Roger. You have the name Kerr, which can be an English name or it can be an Irish name or a Gaelic Scots name, which comes from, a lot of the Kerrs from Tyrone come from O'Cara or O'Cara. And the name originally means spearman. And some of them have become O'Kieran, which has nothing to do with spear. Kier means jet black. So somebody with jet black hair. You have Brown from De Bruyne, which is Anglo-Norman. You have Lagan, which is two origins. Irish common name is Oliocan, which has become Logan. It means bright or shining or lustrous. And it also comes from Dillogan, which is Norman as well. And it looks a bit like lac, which actually is the Irish word for duck. So some people with this name have had their name translated into duck. Bjork, which is an Icelandic name, means birch. Scot means Irish person, but they were border reivers in Scotland. When James I became king of England and Scotland, the people he used all the time to mess up the English in the north of England were the border reivers. He exiled a lot onto Ireland, and they were exiled largely to around Roscommon and North Connacht area, like the Grahams, for example, and the Scots. And so a lot of the Irish ones come from that area and have moved back into Ulster. McGovern, which comes from McGowran, which comes from MacHavran. That means somebody who's got a son of somebody with a sunny experience, sunny disposition. O'Neill I've dealt with means warrior. Martin, which comes from Saint Martin, Martin of Tours, very much venerated in Ireland, and originally comes from the Latin word Mars, the god of war. McPhillamy, just running through your names again. Phillamy is a common Irish name, which means son of somebody who is constantly good. Hepler, which means somebody who deals with grapes, German, vineyards, etc. O'Sheeran, which is somebody who's constant, which becomes Sheeran. Green, which could be de Grain, Norman French, or largely in Ireland, they're Macgrana, which is probably from grain, sunny disposition again. Huegenot, which is the color green. Macglashing, which is a sort of greeny grey of nature, of plants. O'Granan, which is sunny disposition. You have Quinlivan from O'Queen Yan or Queen Jalwan, which means a gentle appearance or noble appearance. Cooney from O'Cuana, which is comely or stooped. Clifford from O'Cloven, which means hairy, basically, which has also come into McRafferty, and it's also an English name as well. You have somebody called Lukaku, which the only one I know is Romelu Lukaku, who plays football in the Premier League, and he's Belgian, but his origin's the Congo, so I'm guessing that that's a Bantu name, but I have no idea what it means. Glacan, which is O'Glachan, which means Glach is a fistful of stuff, full of your fist. Manning comes from O'Manning, Manning, which is a famous tribal name, the Imania, which ruled Galway right through the Midlands, West Midlands of Ireland at one stage. Montgomery, which can be a Scottish name or an English name, which in Ireland quite often is a translation of Macanyumra, son of the ridge, and gives rise to people called Ridge quite often. And the Macanyumras are very common in South Connemara, and none of them are Montgomery, so they're all Macanyumras. Garrett, which is Fitzgerald, we talked about that, son of a German name. McCravey, which comes from Mac Ruary, the son of the red-haired king. O'Brien comes from Brea originally, Brian, which means noble or exalted. It gives rise to Bridget as well. Dunlop, we've talked about before. Fleck is from Affleck, which is Angus up in northeast Scotland. MacElgun comes from MacGilligonna, which is a common name on the border areas. Cathal MacGilligonna, famous poet and composer of songs. The bittern, the Bunnan Bui, the yellow bittern, being one of the most famous of his. Convery, which is, MacAnvera, somebody bad-spirited, it means. Anne means devilish, really, bad-spirited. Curran, O'Curran, which is back to spears again. Curran. O'Canan, from the word Cain, which is a Christian name, meaning enduring or lasting. Lochry, O'Luchra, from Luchar, meaning rush. McMahon from Gauna. Ma is an Irish word for bear, and Gauna is calf, so it's a little bear, which is from MacMahuna and MacMahon. Stuart, Scottish name, famous one, kings, probably originally MacAweir, son of the steward, which gives rise to the name Weir, but starts with an M originally. Needham, which can be an English place name, or the word O'Neill. Young, which can be used for the younger son in English nomenclature, but is also from the Irish O'Hogan, and the name Hogan, little young one. Wallace, Anglo-Norman, frequently de Wallish in Irish-speaking areas. Samson from a Welsh saint. And coming up towards the end here, give you a time. Neeson is Mac Engasa, which is son of the virile one, which gives rise to MacNeese, like the poet, and the O name as well, O Hengasa, which gives rise to Hennessy. Galloway, which is Gaeli, the Norse Gaelic speaking place, which is southwest Scotland, which is Gaelic speaking until a couple of hundred years ago, as was Ayrshire. Robbie Burns was probably Gaelic speaking, for example, and his name certainly is Irish. Gallagher is from O'Gal Chover, which is foreign, probably originally a Norse Irish name. Byrne is from O'Brien, from the word bran, which means raven. O'Brien, O'Brannan, O'Branigan, etc. Bran is also the Welsh word for raven. Gormley could be from Gormflahi, which is the blue noble sovereign one, or the blue-eyed person, Gorm Huli, or Gorm Agila, which is the blue brave person, or Gorm Huahi, which is the blue speared person. Cook from Magavak, or cock, which is Old English. McGreach from McGrechan, which is Old Grechan, and means blind or wounded. Messenger, which is Anglo-Norman. Corrigan from Little Spear again. And I'll let you talk now and ask me questions rather. I'll just go through these very briefly and then question. Lionel, I don't know. Crane, Manx quite often, but it's Old Corran originally, Little Spear. Fraser from Frizzle, which is meaning curly, fresh, etc. Gives rise to the name McKimmy. Connolly, which is Old Congala, which is brave, wolf-like person. Lonigan, Old Lonigan, which is the little blackbird. Frew, meaning a stream, from Persia. McCloskey from Macvlosky, an Antrim name from the word bluska, and gives rise to Mai Vloska, which is mollusk, the plane of these people. Bluska means somebody who bursts out in anger or laughter or what have you. Macmullen, Tyrone name, and Glensavanter name. Macmuillan, the little croppy haired person or bald person. McKernan from MacTiernan, Lord, basically, Ahirna Gentrohara, Lord have mercy. So that Tiernan means Lord. Maguire, Maguire, or, which means a dun color, basically. And lastly, Harris, which is son of Harry, short for Harrison, but gives rise to, also comes from O'Harkey too. Quinn, which comes from Okin, meaning con, chief, brave, chief warrior, basically. And dog again is another dog, wolf name again. Robinson, which can be Irish, O'Currabeen, or English, or Scots. Currab means a defiler or a secretive person, and becomes Mac Robin, which gives rise to Gribbing and O'Gribbing and Cribbin. O'Keefe from O'Keefe, which means noble, gentle, and that's that word there. It gives rise, for example, it gives rise to Keeving, little gentle one. Ross, which is Rossack, meaning a place name, which is a headland of some sort, bulging out place, common name in Irish for a place name, but not used as a surname. McKeever, which is a Norse name, Ever, and that's the Norse original. And now, I hope you've enjoyed a talk which has involved an awful lot of running through names, but I tried to go through most of your names that I got. And thank you for listening to me, and I'll take any questions. Can I close the screen now, by the way, Jason?
You can, if you stop sharing the screen, and then we'll be able to see the participants again.
Okay.
Let me just change my screen view, and I'll say something then just to give you a breather for a second or two.
I'm trying to find out how do I do this.
So I think it may be is it at the top of your screen, perhaps, the option to stop sharing?
It says new share. Doesn't say anything else. Invite. Select camera. Yeah, I don't know what to do about this. Get rid of this. It might be escapeable.
It could be at the bottom. From memory, it's like a red logo. I'll talk anyway while you're maybe there. You are. There we go. I'll just say something to give you a breather for a second. First of all, Stefan, that was excellent. There was so much in that. Like I really enjoyed it. And best of all, well, two things. Best of all, actually, all off the top of your head, which is remarkable. And second of all, we retained pretty much everybody. I think the numbers actually went up as we were going along, so that's always a sign of a good, good online session. Maybe
your name, of course, is the Burka.
Yeah, which I think is it a Norman name?
It's Norman indeed. Yeah, Norse French. Yeah.
I just want to maybe advertise a couple of things. So Stefan very kindly facilitates an Irish language reading session every month, normally at the Lennon Hall Library, but at the moment we're doing these things obviously online. So if anybody would like to get involved in that, you can send me an email. If you're on the chat function, you'll see my email address on the chat function. If not, it's jason.burke@lennonhall.com. If you email me, I can add you to the list, and then you can get involved in that Irish language reading session every month. It would be great to see you there. Second of all, the next of our online events is next Wednesday. These are becoming sort of regular Wednesday night sessions by accident rather than design. But next Wednesday session is at 7 o'clock. It's by Noel McLaughlin and Jeepers, I can't remember the co-author of the book, but it's called How Belfast Got the Blues, about music and politics in Belfast in the 1960s. Okay, so Joanna Braniff, that's the other name, Joanna Braniff and Noel McLaughlin, and they'll be conducting a session about their new publication, How Belfast Got the Blues, and that's next Wednesday night. If you go into the Lennon Hall Library's website, you can register for it in the same way that you've registered for tonight's session. So that's the advertisements out of the way. There were a few things in the chat function. Some of them were very general questions to Stefan. Some of them were more specific. So what I'll do is I'll field the general ones to you, and then maybe the more specific ones, I'll maybe invite the people who asked those questions to come on and say what they have to say. Mostly, I have to say, it's people asking or inquiring about names. So I don't know if you've got a pen and paper handy there, or if you can remember a few of these, because there are a few. Or I can just give you them in turn.
Okay.
Okay, so we have Dewey, D-O-E-Y. There were a couple of people got involved in that conversation with different spellings, so I would call that Dewey or Dowie, maybe.
Yep, it comes as Dowie as well. It's the same name as Dowie, but it comes from O'Dowie originally, which is black-haired person.
Okay.
And it's spelled, by the way, O with a fada, and then D-U-B-H-T-H-A-I-G-H.
Okay. So I hope that answers for her. I can't remember who it was.
There's a lot of them in Northeast Antrim. For example, around Dunlahy, there's a lot of people with this name, and there's a cairn named after them as well.
Some others are Clifford.
Yeah, Clifford is O'Cloveen, and it could be English or Irish. It comes O'Cloveen means clove means to have a coat of something, usually a fuzzy coat. Could be clove, could be feathers, for example. So somebody who might have a kind of furry chest or whatever, it's that kind of thing is what it means. So O'Cloveen, it's C-L-U fada M-H-A fada I-N.
The next one is Egan, E-G-A-N.
Oh,
Sounds
goodness.
English.
I will try and look it up while you get another one out for me and see if I can find it.
We can always come back to people. We can follow up with emails or something, maybe, if we can point people to the information. This was a very specific one as well. The Macaulays from the Glens of Antrim.
I've got Egan for you, by the way. It's easy. It comes from the word AODH originally, which gives rise to a lot of names like McGee, Mackay, McCoy, McHugh, Houston, God knows what. AODH actually means fire, and they're people who followed the cult of the fire, which was common through the whole of Northern Europe. And so the name actually comes from MacEgan, which is AODH, A-G-A fada I-N. So it's one of those diminutive names that are attached to AODH, which McKee, Mackay, McCoy, and so forth.
Brilliant. As I said, the other one was Macaulays from the Glens of Antrim. Can you say anything about them?
Yeah, the Macaulays, it's a mixed one. Some of the Macaulays came over with the Lord of the Isles, and Macaulay can be. I would say most of the Macaulays in the Glens of Antrim are originally the name Olaf, so it would be a mixed Norse Gaelic name. So Ollie comes from Olaf in Norse originally, so it's son of Olaf. And I would say since they came from the Scottish Islands, where, for example, 25% of the genes of Lewis and Harris are Norse genes, and the rest would be Gaelic. So it's a mixed, like the MacLeod, and the MacDonalds are the same as well. MacDonalds come from the word Doan and Gal, Doan and Null. Doan means world and Null means mighty, so it means mighty of the world. So that's a grand name to give yourself if you're an O'Donnell or a MacDonald.
And if anybody's like me who has a very young daughter at home, they may well have an Olaf in their house, because Olaf was made famous by the film Frozen, Frozen 1 and Frozen 2. The last couple we have here is Colgan and Tally, Tally.
Tally, right. Colgan is certainly, almost certainly Irish. I don't want to guess at it, so I mean, I could make a good guess, because Colg means somebody who's pretty abrupt, and possibly fiery, you know. But I will just make sure that I got it right. Colgan, or Colgan. Yeah, here we go. It's from Mac Colgan, Colgan. Colga is an very early personal name, and up in the north here, it nearly always comes from Derry area. So Derry was the Canuckta, originally the place of the O'Cahans, and so O'Colligan. So Colga is somebody who would be pretty fiery, really. It's be a name after disposition. I would make a guess of that. It's not in the book. I'm interpreting what the name means from my knowledge of Old Irish.
No problem. And the other query was a very specific one put forward by Mal. If Mal, could you unmute yourself and maybe just pose your question to Stefan, if you're still with us? Sounds like maybe Mal isn't with us. The other one was Deirdre Convery. Deirdre, are you still with us? I think you had a very specific question as well. If you would unmute yourself and just field that one to Stefan, if you would.
Yes, Stefan actually answered it. It was my name in Irish, which is McAnvra, and he said it's bad spirited or devilish. So there you go.
Devilish person, somebody who's up to tricks, is what it means. I mean, there's quite a lot of names that I mean, O'Kennedy is a version of that. O'Kennedy, which means ugly-headed person. So there are quite a few names that are not necessarily very nice as well. Again, there would be personal things, really. It might be even they've been given a name that they didn't like because they've been in prison. I mean, there's actually McEvany, which is Macanyevany, which means son of the prisoner. So
brilliant.
I've got, by the way, Tally is an Irish name. I've never come on it before, but it's from County Tyrone. It's a set of Tyrone there. There are another bunch of the O'Neills, just like my lot. And it's O'Tathly, which is Taithligh, which means peaceful, a peaceful person. So don't let the O'Colligans meet the O'Taithleys. They've got no chance.
Well, Stefan, I think that brings us to a nice conclusion. I think we've just went past the hour, so that was a great session. And thanks to everyone for tuning in and staying with us throughout. As I say, hopefully we'll see you next Wednesday. If not, we'll hope to see you at some of the future online events with the Linen Hall Library. I will follow up tomorrow with just a brief online questionnaire about how you found the session, things that we should be doing, things that we maybe shouldn't be doing. And also I'll provide you with the link for the YouTube video of this talk so that you can share it with friends and family and on your social media and whatnot. So again, thanks very much. And I'll see you all hopefully in the very near future in the Linen Hall Library. Take care, folks.
Thank you.